The man always eats his meals with headphones on, using them to block out the mocking sounds of his colleagues making fun of his weight. However, the colleagues escalated their harassment by ripping off his headphones and subjecting him to even more ridicule. Despite this, Frank didn't resist and silently endured the humiliation, walking away. The next day, his colleagues continued their relentless taunting, commenting on his appearance and body shape, claiming he must never bathe. They rudely dragged Frank into the bathroom and turned on the shower. The cold water struck his body, yet he lay there like a puppet, silently enduring the shame without a hint of resistance. The following day, the department supervisor approached Frank, inquiring if he was being bullied by his colleagues. When faced with the supervisor's questions, Frank hesitated, perhaps out of kindness or fear of retaliation. Frank chose silence, dismissing his colleagues' actions as typical male banter, not bullying. At over 40 years old, with a slightly balding head and a bulky frame of over 200 pounds, Frank diligently worked as a baggage handler at the airport. Perhaps due to his overly introverted nature, he remained a loner to this day. Every Friday, Frank would enter a familiar restaurant and sit in his usual spot. The restaurant owner, upon seeing Frank, would discreetly put away the cutlery from the opposite seat and serve him a plate of chow mein as usual. Whenever he wanted to escape the indescribable loneliness, he would drive to the tranquil riverside, turn on the radio, contact the radio host, and ask them to play a lively heavy metal song, those moments being his most relaxed and comfortable. One day, in a toy store, Frank made up his mind to buy the remote-controlled car he had longed for. On his way home, he encountered a new arrival, a curious little girl who stared at the toy in his hand. She asked whom the toy was for, whether it was for his son or nephew. Faced with her question, Frank was at a loss for words, embarrassed to admit the toy was for himself. Luckily, the girl's father appeared, greeted him briefly, and changed the subject, rescuing Frank from the awkward situation. Amidst the falling snowflakes, with fewer people on the streets, Frank ventured outside to play with his beloved remote-controlled car in the snowstorm. The bitter cold of Iceland seemed to pierce one's marrow, but for Frank, this solitude and coldness were what he wanted. He enjoyed the desolate and uninhabited environment, finding solace only in such places. Another of his passions was replaying classic World War II battles on a sand table, a hobby that led him to his only friend. In their spare time, the two would meet at the sand table to compete, and only then would Frank let down his guard and reveal a hidden smile. However, unlike Frank, his friend not only enjoys a happy marriage and a stable career, but also has a pair of adorable twin sons. This inevitably leads Frank to show signs of envy amidst his laughter. One day, Frank's stepfather inadvertently disrupted his sand table, which displeased Frank. However, the stepfather took charge and lectured Frank on the importance of getting out more and not being so engrossed in these frivolous hobbies. In his view, Frank's interests were both hollow and dull. On Frank's birthday, his mother prepared a cake for him, while the stepfather gifted him a hat to cover his balding head and signed him up for a dance class, ostensibly hoping he would expand his social circle but actually just finding him a nuisance at home. On the day of the dance class, Frank's mother prepared a rather formal suit for him. Summoning his courage, Frank entered the dance class only to find himself completely out of place, feeling awkward in his suit. Social anxiety forced him to sneak out of the class, returning to his car where he found a sense of security in the enclosed space. Starting the car, a soft melody flowed from the radio, soothing his soul. Don't want to disappoint his mother, so he decided to wait in the car until the dance class ended before going home. However, a sudden snowstorm arrived unexpectedly, causing the dance class to end early. A woman approached Frank's car, hoping for a ride. Frank didn't refuse. It was the first time a woman sat in the passenger seat of Frank's car. However, Frank's appearance and silence led the woman to mistake him for a pervert. Frank hurriedly explained the whole story, and the woman felt somewhat relieved. To thank him for his help, the woman promised to look after him in the dance class next week. Frank neither directly accepted nor rejected the offer. As the woman got out of the car, she jokingly thanked him for not killing her. Frank awkwardly replied, "You're welcome." Watching the woman walk away, Frank's heart seemed to stir with something. One day after work, Frank found that the new neighbor had been locked out because she forgot her keys. Feeling compassionate, he kindly brought the girl back to his home and prepared delicious milk and soft bread for her. Their time together turned out to be unexpectedly enjoyable. Unfortunately, most of the toys in Frank's house were geared toward boys, but the girl didn't mind. In fact, she developed a strong interest in the war-themed sandbox in the house. Curiously, she asked about various details on the sandbox, and Frank patiently answered all her questions. The girl listened quietly, becoming the first person willing to hear Frank talk about the sandbox wars. However, when the girl's father came to pick her up after work, he was unusually cold towards Frank, seemingly not liking him. The next day, the neighbor's girl came over again. She casually mentioned that her father thought Frank was strange and advised her to keep her distance, but she didn't pay any heed to her father's words. She found Frank to be a very good friend. In the evening, Frank dressed in a suit to attend a dance class again, surprising his mother. In class, Frank made a concerted effort to move his large body in rhythm with everyone else, and he was repeatedly reminded by the teacher. Each time this happened, Josephine would turn and offer him an encouraging smile, which infused Frank with boundless energy, making the otherwise dull class quite enjoyable. After the class, Josephine wanted to hang out with Frank, so Frank took her to a restaurant he frequented. This time, he wasn't alone, and the restaurant owner couldn't help but glance at them a few times, and even generously offer them free snacks. After dinner, Frank took Josephine to the seaside, where they sat in the car and chatted. Frank asked Josephine if there was a song she wanted to hear, mentioning that he could call the radio station for a special request. Josephine chose a lyrical song, a stark contrast to Frank's love for heavy metal music. However, for Josephine, Frank decided to make a change. When the radio host heard that Frank, who usually listened to heavy metal, wanted to request a lyrical song, he found it quite amusing. Under the host's questioning, Frank admitted that the song was requested for a girl. The host then inquired about the progress between Frank and the girl, and Frank responded earnestly. Their conversation was heard loud and clear by Josephine sitting in the car, but she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she found Frank's clumsy yet endearing reactions amusing. In this warm atmosphere, the lyrical song sounded particularly moving. After the date, Frank dropped Josephine off at her doorstep. Josephine warmly invited him in for tea, but Frank, who had never experienced a date before, didn't understand the underlying meaning behind Josephine's invitation. He simply stated that he didn't like tea. Josephine then suggested coffee, to which Frank responded that he didn't like coffee either. Disappointed, Josephine got out of the car feeling awkward. The opportunity was right in front of Frank, but he let it slip away so easily. However, after a moment of contemplation, Frank decided to go back and rang the doorbell at Josephine's house, expressing his willingness to stay if there was milk available. Inside, they chatted casually. Although the atmosphere was somewhat awkward, it was manageable. When Josephine learned that Frank worked at the airport, she inadvertently showed a look of envy, admiring his privilege of having standby tickets for international travel. However, despite working at the airport for many years, Frank had never been on a plane. This topic briefly strained the atmosphere, and Frank had to drink milk to mask his inner embarrassment. Josephine then mentioned that she worked at a flower shop and had a strong longing for travel, especially for sunny Egypt. They chatted into the late hours, but Frank didn't stay overnight at Josephine's house. Instead, he displayed gentlemanly behavior and left. This encounter left him feeling very satisfied. Josephine's presence acted as a pivot, prying Frank out of his self-contained world and showing him a broader perspective. One day, a colleague who had previously bullied Frank approached him, seeking his mechanical expertise to fix his car. Frank, setting aside past grievances, kindly helped fix the car. Perhaps feeling guilty, the colleague apologized for his past behavior and warmly invited Frank to a weekend party. However, Frank said he needed to consider it. After work, Frank visited his friend's house and shared his experiences with Josephine. The friend suggested that since Josephine had invited him over for tea, she likely had an interest in him. To further develop his relationship with Josephine, Frank decided to take action. The next day, he went to a travel agency and booked 2 tickets to Egypt. Excitedly, he then headed to the flower shop where Josephine worked, planning to surprise her. However, the flower shop owner informed him that Josephine had been dismissed a long time ago. Frank then drove to Josephine's house and saw her getting out of a garbage truck. It turned out she was now working as a sorter at the waste management center. Perhaps feeling embarrassed about this job, she hadn't been truthful with Frank. When Frank rang the doorbell, Josephine opened the door and was visibly surprised to see him. She asked him why he was there. Frank mentioned that he had gone to the flower shop to find her, but she wasn't there. Feeling insecure, Frank's words were cut short as the dejected Josephine shut him out. Feeling rejected, Frank prepared to turn and leave. However, after a moment's thought, He pressed the doorbell once again.
Fyrirgefðu, ég vissi ekki að hún myndi verða svona reið. Mér alveg sama hvað hún vinnur. Það skiptir mig engu máli.
Frank expressed his intentions, saying he wanted to take her on a trip to Egypt. However, Josephine said that Frank might have misunderstood their relationship. She candidly admitted that she only saw Frank as a good person and didn't have any romantic feelings towards him. This revelation was like a bucket of cold water poured over Frank's head. Turned out that everything was just his wishful thinking. Feeling dejected after the gentle rejection, Frank went to the colleagues' party. Initially, the atmosphere at the party was harmonious, with everyone laughing and enjoying themselves. However, midway through the party, a colleague called in a stripper. Frank wanted to leave but was stopped. This time, Frank didn't choose to remain silent but decided to defend his boundaries. After experiencing those heartbreaking setbacks, Frank seemed to have fallen seriously ill, both physically and mentally. Seeking solace, he decided to go out for a breath of fresh air. The new neighbor eagerly expressed her desire to go with him, and Frank, without much thought, agreed. They drove to the seaside, where the familiar scenery and gentle sea breeze comforted Frank's wounded soul. But the young girl found the place dull and couldn't appreciate the tranquility and healing power of nature. Disappointed, Frank had to take the girl back home. However, as they arrived at the doorstep, they found the police waiting there. The girl's father, frantic over her disappearance, had reported her missing. Despite it being a misunderstanding, the girl's father, upon seeing his daughter with Frank, erupted in anger and accused him unjustly. This sudden storm caught Frank off guard. All he could do was keep apologizing. Despite it being just a misunderstanding, this was not the end of it. Frank was taken to the police station for questioning. Fortunately, the experienced officer interrogating him sensed that he was just being kind and quickly released him. Although cleared by the police, Frank faced discrimination from the entire community. Parents were reluctant to let their children near him. One day, Frank encountered the girl and her friend downstairs. While the friend was curious about Frank's remote-controlled car, the girl could only watch from afar, likely still reeling from her father's scolding from the previous incident. When the boy's mother saw him with Frank, she immediately asked the boy to leave Frank, the look of disdain in her eyes deeply hurting Frank. Struggling through his days, yearning for understanding and acceptance, Frank returned to the dance class, hoping to see Josephine. But his wish was in vain. For the following days, he worried about Josephine, yet she never showed up at the dance class. He felt a growing sense of concern. In his desperation, he broke the small window on Josephine's door and entered her home. Dishes were piled high in the kitchen, and the television seemed to have been on for a long time. Despite Frank searching every room, Josephine was nowhere to be found. Then, a noise came from the storage room. Following the sound, Frank finally discovered Josephine. She was tormented by depression to the point of being unrecognizable. She asked Frank to leave, but he chose to stay. After helping her feed her cat, he silently sat on the living room couch, keeping watch throughout the night. The next morning, Frank carefully prepared breakfast for Josephine and meticulously cleaned the house. Knowing that Josephine might not quickly emerge from the shadow of depression, he deliberately took a long vacation from work to better care for her. In the following days, Frank would prepare meals and place them delicately at Josephine's doorstep, patiently chatting with her. To ensure Josephine wouldn't lose her job at the garbage station, Frank voluntarily took over her responsibilities. During lunch breaks, his new colleagues gossiped about him. He thought they were laughing at his appearance like his former colleagues used to. To his surprise, his co-workers were exceptionally friendly, not judging him by his looks and even inviting him to watch games after work. Sitting together, drinking and watching sports, Frank experienced a harmonious atmosphere he had never known before. One day, Frank went to the flower shop, intending to pick out a bouquet for Josephine. Unsure of her specific preferences, he decided to buy a variety of flowers, creating a colorful bouquet. However, upon returning to Josephine's home, he heard her sobbing. He slowly opened the storage room door. Josephine didn't resist his concerns this time, but willingly embraced him. Frank gently comforted her. As dinner time approached, Frank prepared a dinner for Josephine. Perhaps it was this meticulous care that helped Josephine open up. After dinner, she slept soundly. With Frank's companionship and care, Josephine finally emerged from the darkness. She listened to music and painted the walls, seemingly preparing for a new phase in life. Josephine took Frank to a storefront, envisioning opening her own flower shop there. Seeing her hopeful eyes, Frank knew she was ready to face new challenges in life. Soon, Frank's time at the garbage station was coming to an end. As a parting gift, his colleagues unexpectedly found a plastic coconut tree while sorting through garbage and presented it to Frank, symbolizing their priceless friendship. After work that day, as Frank stepped inside his home, Josephine eagerly hugged him. In this warm embrace, their bond grew stronger. As the morning sunlight filtered through pink curtains, casting dappled light on Frank, it seemed his life was finally embracing brightness. In the days that followed, they danced together, shared meals, and even planned a trip to Egypt. Their relationship deepened, and their feelings for each other grew stronger. One day, Josephine suggested moving in together, surprising Frank. However, after careful consideration, Frank felt it wasn't the right time as he couldn't leave his elderly mother living alone. This decision sparked dissatisfaction in Josephine, who felt Frank's reluctance to move in together was a sign of either disliking her or immaturity. In the end, Josephine left in anger, leaving Frank in intense inner turmoil. Eventually, he mustered the strength to chase after her, ultimately choosing to follow love over family. Later, Frank smoothed over the sand table he had painstakingly built, bidding farewell to the past. He planned to give all his beloved toys as a parting gift to the neighbor's young girl, but she wasn't around, so her father accepted them on her behalf. Before leaving, the girl's father unexpectedly apologized for the earlier events, explaining that he had just gone through a difficult divorce and was struggling emotionally. Frank simply replied, "It's okay." Soon, Frank enlisted the help of his friend to move. As they moved each item into Josephine's room, Frank's heart gradually filled with happiness and anticipation. However, Josephine appeared increasingly anxious, pacing back and forth with a furrowed brow. As they neared the end of the move, Josephine stopped Frank, tearfully admitting she had made a mistake and she wasn't ready. Frank didn't say much, his large figure appearing somewhat lonely in the light. Silently, he began moving the belongings back, while Josephine stood by the window. Their eyes met at that moment, both filled with deep sadness. Fate seemed to enjoy playing cruel jokes on Frank. All he could do was accept it calmly. After experiencing tumultuous love, Frank's days returned to normalcy, as if everything had come full circle. When a snowstorm raged once more, with the lampposts swaying in the wind and snow, Frank's mood plummeted to its lowest point. His gaze turned to the bustling travelers on the bridge, and a strong desire surged within Frank. He wanted to change himself and live a new life. Thus, he decided to leave, embarking on the trip to Egypt alone. Before departing, he bought the shop that Josephine dreamed of, renovated it with his friend, and left satisfied after the final piece of glass was installed. He gently placed the shop key in Josephine's mailbox, closing that chapter of the past. Back at the airport, standing on the bridge, Frank took the first step into a new chapter of his life. The plane's engines roared, and at that moment he found his own direction. Looking back at his former workplace, memories replayed like a movie in his mind, yet his heart remained unusually calm. As the plane lifted off the ground, the typically reserved Frank revealed a content and serene smile, knowing that a new journey had begun. His future was filled with endless possibilities. The Icelandic film Virgin Mountain shows a different life for lonely people. In an era of looks are everything, the unattractive can be harshly judged. These biases brought pain to Frank's life, but ultimately, he emerged from the shadows. Though his romance with Josephine was brief, it showed him another possibility in life, pushing him out of his stagnant routine and giving him the courage to explore a different life and future. Appearance is never the most important thing. Courage is the essential quality for enjoying this world. I strongly recommend watching the original film, Virgin Mountain, available for free on Tubi.